Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ed Carbajal. Ed, why don't you tell the fans what we got for them this week?
This week we have somebody I work with over at Expectation Sports. Been following his stuff for a while, probably longer than I actually know. I've worked with him. Adam Martin, who's what would you call sports betting writer?
Sure, that sounds good. We'll take that. I wear a lot of hats, so I'll take that one though. That makes the most sense, I think.
Yeah, and then I know you've done stuff with James Lynch in the past. Was also a friend and somebody I've worked with at a few places. So I mean, it was long overdue. And just for the listeners to know, you're up north, right? You're in Canada.
Yeah, the Great White North, right? No, I'm in just outside Toronto. And we haven't had any snow yet, guys. So it's it's coming. It's coming. And I think you're in New Jersey, Ed, if I'm not mistaken, or
yeah. You know what's weird? It's going to be like summer the next 4 days here. So.
Where are you, Matt? Where are you?
I'm in Southern California. I'm in Temecula, between San Diego and LA.
Look at this guy. He's never seen snow before in his life, probably.
I can drive to it about an hour.
Yeah,
get to the beach in about 2.
Jealous, definitely jealous. I'm glad to be on with you guys, and we'll talk about some fights for sure. It's gonna be
great. Why don't we just start off? Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? You're obviously new to this podcast. Why don't you tell us how you got into the sport and how it became? Obviously, it's a big passion of yours, much like it is ours. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a good way to get started here. So I went to school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. Basically, that's kind of where it started. When you go to school and do your undergrad in history and geography, I think most people would probably want to be a teacher, but I just didn't really want to do that. So this is about 2009, I believe I finished 2010. And I was like, I need to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And somehow I stumbled upon this sports journalism program and took that. And this is about the time I was getting into MMA as well, because I'd been a sports fan pretty much my whole life. I played sports my whole life. And then MMA was something that was getting really popular around that time. Like you had Brock Lesnar, you had GSP, you had Anderson Silva. So I came on around that time. And I thought, you know what, this is a good opportunity to do this sport. So went to the journalism school and I told them I want to do this, and they were like, well, you probably won't make too much of a career out of this because the sport's not really that big and it's not going anywhere. And I said I believe in it and I want to do this. So that was in 2010 and 11, and I've been doing it for almost 14 years now, getting a check out of this. So it actually worked out pretty well for me, I think, over the time. And really the thing is, and just like you mentioned, like I just love the sport, right? Like, and I think that's really what it comes down to, because like I've been in this business so long, like there's so many people have come and gone, they don't have the same passion for it, and that's what will keep you in the sport for a long time. So that's pretty much what it is, man. Like I just loved it. It was an opportunity for me. MMA just gotten legalized in Ontario. That's another big part of the story. Like in 2011, right when I started my school program, so it just made sense for me to do it. And a lot of people in my classes, they ended up doing really great stuff in stuff like baseball and basketball and hockey and football, and I'm happy for them. It's just this was what I wanted to do, and I'm glad that it's been a good career. I mean, there's been a lot of ups and downs over. Like, there's been so many times where I was like, I don't think I could do this. I don't think I can make a living out of this. I think I need to stop doing this. It was a hobby for a while. Now it is, a job. It is a career. So it's been good, man. And like I said, I just really enjoy the sport. I love watching it. Love talking about it. And that's why I'm here with you guys. That's pretty much it.
So let me ask you, like, I thought you were gonna say something like you majored in math or something like that, but like, because you do a lot of you write about the odds and stuff like that. So how did you fall into? I mean, MMA is already kind of niche, but how did a lot of people can write about it? Like I kind of gravitate towards the fighter's stories just because I can relate. I understand the training room, the environment. So like, how did you fall into like zeroing in on actual like betting on MMA?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I like that question. So when I started, I mean, that was not the goal or the path I thought I would take. I thought I would be a writer. I thought a writer about stories for the fighters, like you, interviewing the fighters. And that's what I started doing. Like my first year was interviewing guys on the phone, going to events, interviewing people, doing press conferences, and it was great, and I enjoyed it. Right. A year into my career, though, like I kind of stumbled upon the betting thing and started just getting interested in it. My first job was at it was basically like a TV station in Toronto. Aaron Bronstetter, who's a very popular guy here, he actually brought me in as an intern. So that was my first job out of school. So he was the first guy who gave me a job. We've been friends for years. And I mean, I love the guy, right? And he's obviously one of the most respected guys. So you can see why I was eager to work with him and get my foothold there. But the thing was, like, he basically brought me on as intern, and like a month or two into that, he left for another job. So I kind of like basically got thrown into the fire right away, which was fine. And then it just kind of grew into something. But the first job I had, the TV station got bought up by another station. So they were like, I got a phone call like one morning saying, "Hey, don't come in the office. Your job's been cut." So at that point, like, I remember like, shit, I got to figure out what to do here. And luckily I'd gotten like to know Nick Kalikas on Twitter. He's a MMA odds guy. You see him all over doing he's big now, right? But back then it was, it was more niche, like you said, Ed. And we started talking, and he's like, "Hey, like, I have this small website if you want to jump on and start writing about betting odds." That's basically what happened. So I needed a job. I started doing that. I was actually getting interested in this at the same time. So this kind of lined up where, like, I needed a job, he needed someone to write, and then that was in 2012. So I mean, it's been 12 or 13 years now of doing this, and as time has gone on, like, that's become like the focus. And also, like, the thing was, like, I got into it before it was legalized, right? Like, and now legalized, it's way bigger now, so it worked out pretty well. And a few years ago, 2021, there was a website called bookies.com that reached out to me, and they said, like, "We're looking for someone to join us, and we really like your resume. Would you be interested in this?" And at the time, I was working full time at bjpenn.com, doing a lot of news articles and stuff. And I liked working. It was actually a good job, Ed. I enjoyed it, but I always knew that I wanted to, do the betting thing full time if I could. So I took the job, and I've been there for over 3 years now. It's been amazing. So it's been good. And then obviously I still do the thing with spectation on the side. When I told them, like, with the new job, I said, "Listen, I want to do this, but I really want to write about MMA still on the side. I still want to do it." And they said, "Yeah, you can do it." So that's kind of why I'm still with spectation. So that's what's going on, man. I mean, like, it's a great question though. Like, but for me, it was like a timing thing, Ed. That's pretty much what happened. Right place, right time, I guess. And yeah, I enjoy writing about it. And it just, to me, it's like, it's always made the fights a little bit more interesting to me, like thinking about it from like an odds perspective and like who I'm going to pick and stuff like that. So I just have a different way of looking at the fight. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
You mentioned, it became legal in Quebec in 2011. Ed being in New Jersey, me being in Southern California, we were kind of at both ends of the country as far as like the start of MMA. Yeah. Basically, like, Ed had New Jersey, which was huge in the early scene. I had the West Coast, which didn't have UFCs per se, but we had the King of the Cages. We had a lot of the stuff coming.
Tachi Pal's fights, right?
There it is. That's Northern California, but Southern California was more King of the Cage. We had there was just a lot of action, and plus we were close to Vegas, so we were able to really have that contact with the fight world. But yet, even in those early days, I didn't exactly run into a lot of people who knew the fight game. For you, it had to be an advantage, like you said, right place, right time, in that you got into a sport which wasn't really, I mean, was it huge in Canada? Obviously at the GSP era, but was how easy was it for you to find a fellow MMA fan walking the streets?
That's a great question too. So I think it was, again, right place, right time. It was starting to become more popular. And some of my friends were into it at that time, like my personal friends. And then all of a sudden, I get into the business, and then I start to find people like Aaron and James Lynch, who became, and you work with him now, Ed, for a while. Like, we became friends he used to live in Toronto, so we started watching the fights together. So we'd have this little group of guys that we'd all get together on Saturday nights and watch the fights together, and we all became like basically media members as well. We were all working in it, but that's all like what we became doing full time afterwards. So it was just, yeah. I mean, like, I really think a lot of stuff is like you're working hard, you're doing what you want to do, but also you're getting a little bit lucky meeting the right people too and being in the right spot at the right time. I mean, that's just a fact, right? Like, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, I think that, like I said, the legalization here in Ontario in 2011, like UFC 129 was the first event that I went to as a journalist, as a media member, I guess. And that was GSP Jake Shields. That was the Aldo Hominick card. So that was the biggest event. Like, it's actually still one of the biggest events of all time. So that was the first one I kind of like covered. And now they come every year, right? So yeah, it was just it was good timing, and luckily there was people that also loved it. And I think over the years it's just gotten bigger, like, right, especially since COVID. I think that really made it pretty big after that, with people staying at home and needing something to do, and UFC became one of the only things you could do, watch the sport. So yeah, it's been a good ride. It's been a lot of ups and downs though, guys. Like, I mean, it has not been a smooth ride. Like, there's no doubt. Like, like I said, there's been so many times where I thought I can't do this make a living, but it just kept pushing through.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I didn't walk away. I mean, the one time I thought about walking away from my day job was not that long ago.
Yeah.
But then it was just like, you see it all the time, especially, we're on Twitter all the time. You see all the folks that say, "Oh man, I just got let go," and then some of them disappear. So it's just like, and James and I have talked about it too. Like I'm not gonna. I like doing this, but I don't want it to affect me in a way that it like hits me with like this severe desperation or depression. So I like having the security blanket of a full-time job and just doing all this other work on the side. I mean, outside of my own jiu-jitsu training and teaching and stuff, I don't really like do much else outside of working. If I'm not doing my day job, I'm writing, and if I'm not doing that, I'm doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So,
and that was the other thing. I should mention that too. I mean, I kind of forgot about that, but like, I used to train Muay Thai, and I'd be at the gym all the time too. So I'd be around people that love the sport as well. I don't train anymore. I wish I did, but I just don't have that commitment to the time right now. I'm a father too, so it's a little difficult to balance everything. I'm not making excuses, but it's just like not the thing that I can do full time, because I trained every day. I mean, I did take one fight back in 2014. I took a Muay Thai fight. It didn't go very well, but I did have that experience of getting in there and mixing up a bit. So yeah, I mean, that was another thing that, again, I really love the sport. I wanted to try it for myself. I enjoyed the training. I know you said you're doing jiu-jitsu too. That's amazing. I tried jiu-jitsu. Wasn't my thing, Ed. I mean, it's great. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the striking though. I did like doing all the striking drills, and like I said, I did the fight, which was crazy. But yeah, no, I think that was another thing. Just being around people in the gym, talking about the sport. It was awesome. So it's just like I said, I just love it, and I love talking to people about it, and that's why I'm here with you guys today, right? So,
what I was going to ask you though before I went off on that tangent was,
sure.
When you do, because I remember I used to track before, like during the Fox era, and I think I might have told you about this, Matt. I used to track all my picks. I had a spreadsheet and everything. And the girl I was seeing at the time she was like big into. She was a consultant and was really good with Excel. She made me the spreadsheet so I could track all my picks for fights and stuff like that. Do you do anything like that to like see how accurate you are? Do you have like a because I was like 61% accurate with my picks back then. Now it's definitely not anywhere near that. I'm actually pretty bad now, but like how do you keep track of like what makes your predictions or analysis, like how do you follow it all, and how do you back it up, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, no, that's another good question. So I mean, I've a pretty good memory overall. So I remember like pretty much all the fights. I remember where I was watching them, remember what happened in them. But of course, you do need to track them. So MMA oddsbreaker.com. That's one of the sites. The first one that brought me in back in 2012. I'm still there 12 years later. So that's with Nick. We have a staff picks where we pick every fight for every card, and I've been doing that for over 10 years. So we track that. That's public. Everyone can see it. I am in first place this year. I haven't come in first place actually ever, which is crazy, but never have. It's not easy, right? Like, picking fights is not easy. If everyone could do it, we'd have castles would be living in it right now, right, guys? With butlers that are serving us while we're
they wouldn't offer gambling if it was easy.
It's just exactly, it's not easy, right? Like, you have to spend time to, like, as you guys know, to like do your picks, break down the fights, and the betting part is difficult, but I'm having a good year. And then there's another guy that tracks everyone's picks like publicly as well. I'm just looking right now. I'm at like 68% right now, which I'm looking at this guy's spreadsheet, and that would be number one right now of like all the guys that have a YouTube podcast. According to this, I'm number one. So I mean, that's awesome. There's still 2 months left in the year. We'll see, but hey, man, if I can, that's something to hang your hat on for sure.
Yeah,
if you're beating, look, a lot of these guys are big names at picking fights.
Is that main card, or is that entire start to finish?
That's the entire card.
Yeah, that's
so
impressive then, because
Yeah.
that's it's gotten deep now.
Yeah,
Like
actually, you know what? There's one other guy that's ahead of me right now. So he's at 69. I'm at 68, which is still amazing though. Like I've never had a year this good. Like you had, like I've mostly been around the 60% mark, which is still pretty good. But if you're almost at 70%, I mean, like obviously the predictions have been good this year. But yeah, for sure. Like, and for me, like I enjoy breaking down those prelim fights. You know what I mean? Like I love that, going into these guys that, you know, I've never seen before, and then watching the tape in them or watching the Contender series. And so yeah. So I enjoy that. But like you said, like these cards are deep now. The last card was like 13 fights or whatever. This is 14 this weekend.
It's with the roster's deep too. So it's not you're not seeing the repeat fighter every 3 months like you used to. Now it's every 6 months. You know, so you have that many more fighters that you gotta become familiar with. So that's extremely impressive. And to do that weekly is I mean, it's dedication.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing, like I don't, like a lot of people probably like charge for their picks or whatever. Like I don't ask people to, you know, pay for my picks. I wouldn't want to do that. I just enjoy breaking them down, and they're not always going to be right, but and actually that's the funny thing though. When you get them wrong, that's when you hear people more. They're like, "Hey, I tailed you on this guy. He lost. What about all those picks I got right though, dude?" Right? Like they forget about that, Ed. So
but no, that's actually one of my questions, because like you said, if you charge for them, they think they have that gives them the green light to.
Well, I think if you're charging people money, like I think you do open yourself up more for criticism. I've never wanted to go down that tout road, and plus, like I'm not a tout, right? Like I have just other things I'm doing. I don't need to like be doing that, but I mean, it's always an option. Obviously, I'm not hating on people that do that. If they want to do that, that's fine. And there's people that are better than me, quite frankly. I mean, I know that, but you know, if you want to listen to someone who has like you know, good thoughts about it and just enjoys talking about it, then I'm gonna be someone to listen to for sure.
And fighting is not really something that you can actually, I mean, if anything is the most unpredictable, I would say fighting is. I mean, anything can happen at any given moment in a fight. And the thing is like, you know, like when the underdog does come out on top. I mean, I know, you know, I one that comes to mind is Anthony Ruiz when he knocked out Joshua in boxing. Like that, I remember that because I had whatever was left in my little FanDuel account. I put it down and I just went about my business. And then I was at a buddy's house watching the fight and drinking. Then I remembered, I was like, holy shit, I put money on this. And then when I looked, I was like, oh my God. And I read all the articles about how people, you know, like certain sports books were like in the red because of it, because he was such a huge underdog and stuff like that. So it's just something that you really can't put too much. It's risky to do what you do. It just seems it's like it's so risky. So how do you do the research to kind of like at least be at your 68%? You know, like.
Well, I just think it's like I said, just having good memory and remembering the fighters and just again liking watching the fights and doing like the extra stuff. Like a lot of people don't watch Contender Series. Like I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys do, but I do watch it. I mean, I watch, you know, other promotions, PFL, Bellator, but even like some of the smaller cards, like for Spectation, right? Like I do the betting previews for Spectation. Like only a few sports books have those odds, but I want them to be somewhat accurate. So I'm looking around on YouTube. Is there tape for this guy? Like some of these guys have like a couple fights, like a lot of them amateur fights, as you know, because you interview these guys. So that's yeah. I mean, it does take a lot of time. But yeah, it's again, it's part of the process, and I enjoy doing it. So.
So in recent memory, can you think of a big fight? Let's try to do a main card, I guess, or it could be a prelim if you got off the top of your head. But where you saw the odds and you were like, "That's just crazy."
Like in a good way or about like well,
either way, like one where you saw it and you're like, well, that guy's gonna win, and why is he plus, you know, 240? You know, like any just looked at it and like, man, like if I wish I had 50,000 excess money, you know, to drop on
that'd be
it,
awesome.
You know?
No, for sure. I mean, there's fights like that all the time, and here's the one thing, like everyone has a different opinion about the fight. So some people have better reads on certain fights than other people, right? So there's some fights where people are like, "Oh, I'm so confident this guy wins," and I'm like, "I don't know, I don't think so." And then all of a sudden, this guy dominates the dude, and I'm like, "Wow!" I'm like, "Okay, I should listen to you," or you know, like you have a great read on that fight. But like for me, I'm just looking at like this year, kind of. One fight I guess that would immediately pop to mind. was Dustin Poirier when he fought Benoit Saint-Denis. He was a big underdog in that fight. And while I thought Benoit Saint-Denis was a good prospect, he really lacked in the big fight experience to Dustin and in a 5-round fight, especially. So he was a huge underdog, and I definitely put a little bit of money on that. So that was one that immediately comes to mind. But yeah, I think it's a good question because like for me, it's like I think that it's tougher now to bet on the fights because I think there's just more information about it. There's more stats out there. There's more sports books taking action. There's more people betting on the fights. There's more people giving their opinions. Like 10 years ago, I think it was the lines were easier to like quote unquote beat. Like for instance, like another one good example I remember was when Brock fought Cain Velasquez and Cain was an underdog. Like looking back, that's crazy, right? Like you have a guy who's basically one of the best heavyweights if he never got hurt, taking on Brock, who was a good fighter, but also like, dealing with illnesses and also, not a great striker, right? In a fight against a wrestler who's going to stop his takedown. So, I mean, that was one that I remember, like when I first started, I'm like, why? How is he the underdog in this fight? So that was one that, I won. Again, that was a long time ago. It was 2010, I want to say, or something, but that's one that comes to mind too. And again, I've made some good picks over the years. I made some bad picks too, for sure. But it comes with the territory, right? You have to be willing to like make risky picks sometimes, quote unquote, and like pick people that like other people think will lose. Like you have to, you have to like go with like even in like it's like in other sports, like in football, right? There are bad teams that win like every Sunday, as you guys know. Like every Sunday, there's a big upset. Like this last week, there was a few upsets, and if you were the guy that was willing to put money on like Baltimore lost to Cleveland, if you had the balls to put money on Cleveland, you would have cleaned up. I wouldn't have. I never saw that coming personally, right? But if you did, you would have cleaned up. So once in a while, or I don't even know if to say once in a while, like I probably like every couple cards, I would say like going for a long shot pick is not a bad thing to do because there are upsets in the sport that happen. It's not as frequent, like I said, because the odds are so tight now. But there are still these upsets that happen once, and even I'm looking at the last couple cards. Like there's been a few upsets in the main events. Like Brandon Royval was a pretty big underdog. His fight. Renato Moicano was a pretty big underdog in his fight. So there are still upsets. It's just not as easy to find, I guess, spot as used to be maybe.
Let me ask you this then, just because you kind of touched on it. If you can think of it, what was your absolute worst pick that you were like, what the fuck was I doing?
Oh, I mean,
what was your best one that you were like, I told you, and nobody else picked it? So
okay, I mean, just in recent memory, like again, there's bad ones and good ones on both sides, but oh man, a really bad one was I picked Yuri against Pereira in the rematch. So I picked Alex in the first fight last year when he knocked him out. But then the rematch came around on short notice. I'm like, you know what? I'll take a shot on Yuri. Everyone's writing him off, and people are thinking he's not going to win. He gets destroyed with a head kick. So that wasn't very good. And I was like, oh shit, like it wasn't good. And then for fights for guys that won, I mean, there's probably a few I'm thinking about, but like even recently, there was one a couple cards ago. Court McGee was fighting Tim Means, and actually, he's talking about interviews. Tim was one of the first guys to interview when Tim made his debut in the UFC. I remember this 2012. That's when I was doing the interviews, and I remember talking to him. He was a favorite of mine over the years. But at this point in his career, I'm like, he's probably going to lose to a wrestler, and Court McGee's like plus 200 underdog. And I was like one of the only people that I remember that I knew that picked him. And he went and out there and submitted him in like 2 minutes. So that was a really good pick. So, and people were calling me crazy, right? So again, you got to be willing to like make those risky underdog picks sometimes, not all the time, but if you think you have a good read on it, then take a shot on it for sure.
Yeah.
When I go to Vegas, pretty much the only time I gambles when I go to Vegas for the UFC fights.
You guys don't have legalized gambling there. I know you can use like offshore sports books, right? In California.
Yeah, there's probably ways to do it. I go to Vegas so much. I just mean
like you don't have like a DraftKings you could pull up on your phone and like
you
like
can do it. I don't know what the limitations are. I don't think you can bet. You can do certain bets, but not. I don't know all the limitations.
But you're right by Vegas, right? You can just drive there, right?
I'm a couple hours to Vegas. I have and if I just want to throw money on a table, I got Pechanga Casino.
Oh yeah,
where they have a bunch of Bellator events. I mean, 5 minutes down the road. So I do have options if I want to give my money away. My question though is when you go to the fights, obviously back in the day in the early UFC days when they were at MGM Grand and Mandalay Bay, you had in and out accessibility. So like a fight's coming, you didn't have to do. Basically, what I'm getting at is where do you stand on straight bets versus parlays? Because now when you go to T-Mobile, you can't come back out. So basically, if you're trying to stack money, your only option is to do a parlay, which can crash 10 minutes into the event, and then you're done betting. Now you can do the mobile stuff, but I'm talking about handing stuff over.
I mean, it's a great question, but here's the
parlay
thing,
as big of a sucker bet basically as it seems to me.
Yeah. So like, I've never even made like a bet with like a little piece of paper. Like I've only did mobile bets, right? Like that's what I've always did, online bets before the mobile apps became popular. I've never, I've been to Vegas, but I never like went to like the booth or like the counter and asked, I put a stack of money. So I know what you're saying, but in general, like, parlays are, like you said, kind of, I don't want to say they're suckers bet because people do occasionally hit them, right? But they're not as I think profitable in the long term than a straight bet where, because the thing is, like, and like we were saying, like, man, betting's hard and picking fights is not easy either. So you have a better likelihood of like winning one compared to like a 3-team parlay. And then there's been so many times, guys, where like I put 3 guys down and the first 2 guys won easily and the third guy gets knocked out in like 30 seconds. And you're like, fuck.
Why didn't a bad decision.
Or a horrible decision. And I think that was another thing to keep in mind. Like, some of the bets I made, the memorable ones are like ones I lost a split decision on. And I'm like, damn it. Like, it sucks, right? Especially when like everyone that made decisions is like, all the media is like this and all the fans are like this. But 2 of these judges, of the 3 guys, are like, yeah, this guy slightly won. So that's something to keep in mind. I think that's one of the biggest problems with betting on right now. And a lot of people think it's like corruption or, these judges are getting paid off or something. Like, I mean, I can't see that for sure, but some of these decisions really make you scratch your head. So, but yeah, in general, like, I think straight bets are probably the way to go. I know a lot of people like playing like prop bets and stuff like that, and the odds are always like really juicy and stuff, but I've never really like did them. Like, I think you can definitely find some value for sure. But for me, it's like that adds another layer of like complication to it. Like, again, it's already hard enough to pick who wins, and then you have to pick how they win on top of that and like what round they win. It makes it like dicey. Although again, some people are really good with it. So I don't want to tell people how to bet. I mean, there's some people that do parlays strictly and they're profitable. But for me, it's been better to do like straight bets, and like I'd rather like make a bigger bet on like one guy than like a smaller bet on 3 to like make up that one, basically. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Real quick follow, Ed. Let me just stick with the parlay thing real quick. Just for my clarification, because I think I understand it, but for the other people listening, I got friends and stuff listening too, obviously. A parlay is nothing more than just carrying the bet over and over. So if you can do the same bets individually, you can still just carry over your winnings and still make the same as a parlay, but you just can stop at any time, right?
Yes. Pretty much, yeah. And that's the thing. Like, a lot of people are like, for instance, there'll be a guy that, for instance, he's like minus 300 favorite, right? So it's a 3-1 favorite. And they're like, well, I'm not going to bet it straight, but I put him in a parlay. It doesn't really make sense when you think of it, because you're doing the same thing anyways. You're just, like you said, carrying it over to the next bet. Now, I do understand what you just said about like if you go to an event, like you can't leave and then come back in. That makes sense in that case. But again, with the mobile apps and everything now, like there's ways around that now. Like, there's no reason not to, really. So, but what you said makes sense, especially back in the day too. So, but yeah, I mean, like, I think it's a good question. And again, people have different strategies. Like, there's people that are really good at hitting parlays, and there's people that like do parlays of props, which I find crazy, but sometimes they hit.
Yeah.
And another thing too about like betting is like, when you see people post these like bet slips online and stuff, they're like, oh, I won like all this money and stuff. But the thing is, like, you have to remember, like, it's all fake, right? It's like social media is fake. No one's posting when they lose. No one says when they lose. They only post when they win. Like, if I just posted my winners, that people would think,
unless you're
like,
Drake.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's Drake. Yeah, but he's rich, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, if I was rich, man, I would just be like, I wouldn't work. I would just bet all day, like on random stuff, like cricket and like handball and stuff like that. I would just be betting fiend. But yeah, no, I think that I think the way to go is a straight bets, personally.
Yeah, you talk about how you watch a lot of tape and stuff like that, and I think that's where the type of bet matters. If you know the 2 fighters, especially if you know, or at least you know one fighter that well, like a fighter for me that I've always, with the exception of his last fight, but a fighter for me that I've always I'll look at the matchup on paper, and then I'll see who they're fighting and know what I do some research on their opponent.
Yeah.
But for me, like Justin Gaethje, just because I've covered his whole career from when he rose to his title shot and winning the title at World Series of Fighting, and when he got into UFC, and he was somebody that I not only am I a big fan, I'm still a big fan of his, but I just knew his whole deal.
Yep.
And every time I put bet on him, there was never the same bet. It was either, how he was going to win, or or the straight bet, or
yep.
I remember even when he lost, like I won money on him when he lost, because I put money on when he lost to Oliveira, I put money on if he would drop him in the first round, and he did.
Wow, nice.
And so it was like, and it was just looking at them. It was weird. I felt like you've seen Casino, Robert De Niro, how his character kind of like just knew how to do bets in the beginning of the movie. That I with Justin Gaethje, with the exception of the last fight, I've always just been able to look at who he's fighting, and I'm like, man, this is going to happen for him. This is going to happen for him. I didn't predict the other one.
Hey, I mean, like I said, like there's certain fighters you have like good reads on, and certain fights you have good reads on, and like if you have a good read on something, that's a good thing. Like I'm just thinking about myself right now. I just pulled him up. Tai Tuivasa has had 16 fights in the UFC. I've got all 16 right. I've got every fight he's got right. He's fought in right. I haven't bet on them all, but I still picked them all right. So that's a fighter I have a good read on. Like I feel confident when he goes into a fight, knowing like, hey, he's probably going to win or lose because you have a good read on this guy. But there's certain fighters that I suck at picking their fights. Like I try to think. Like actually, Brandon Royval would be a good example of them. Like I'm not very good at picking his fights, and those are guys I try to avoid because they're like, okay, when I pick him to win, actually Bilal would be another one. Bilal's won like I think 5 or 6 straight fights as an underdog, and I don't think I picked him in any of those fights. So I have a bad read on him as a fighter, and I think you have to like know that. I think there's a big problem with like ego in this space too, like thinking you're invincible and like you can always beat the books and like you're smarter than the odds makers, you're smarter than everyone else. Again, in some cases you have good reads on certain fighters, but you can't have that read on every single fighter. And I just think you have to like know when to like stay away. Like I think that's one of the biggest things is like not betting on every fight. So like if there's 13 fights on the card, I think betting on like 3 of them is a good like number, something like that. Like if you're betting on every fight, you're going to lose just because the way that the lines are like juiced and stuff, like it just makes it hard to win long term. But if you bet on like if you pick like 3 fighters or something, or even 2 or something, or 4, whatever it is, like a smaller number, I think that's the way to go. So like for me, like I like to pick like 3 that like I feel good about, and even sometimes I get one of those guys wrong, and it's not good, right? But rarely would I get all 3 wrong because they're my most like confident picks on a card. So
one thing I like to take into account is, especially when you got an undefeated fighter, is like how they rebound from their first loss. Guys who have never tasted their own blood when they're going up against a violent fighter who is going to dish out punishment. You kind of, I mean, in this, especially in the sport, like until somebody's on the downside or the wrong side of getting beat up, you really don't know where they stand in the sport because everybody can be a front runner. So that's just a couple things that I look at. Is there any fighters that any fighters that are just great against? Well, Bilal, I guess, would be one. You just mentioned him for somebody who just is totally, the anti-odds kind of guy. He constantly winning. So I guess that answered the own question there. Let me ask you about you. Let me ask you about the UFC and their stance on gambling. Over the whole history of the sport, guys could go into the casino and basically bet on themselves. Yep. You probably didn't want it known if you bet against yourself. That probably wasn't something that was advertised very often. Although I would think you'd be a fool to believe that it didn't happen.
I'm sure it's happened
a lot, and probably still doesn't happen quite a bit. Help clear up what the UFC said, because I was under the impression of maybe 2 years ago-ish, they said, hey, no more gambling with our fighters. But it seems like every 4th press conference, you hear somebody talking about how much money they laid on themselves or how much their coach bet on them. What is the official stance on that?
That's a great question. So I remember actually in 2013 at Jones and Gustafson, that was in Toronto, and that was, again, one of the greatest fights of all time. You guys know that. Dana did. He used to do. I don't think he does it anymore, but you used to do these scrums with the media at these events where you go around, you get your little handheld microphone thing. You go up right around and you start asking him random questions. So I remember there was one, and I asked him. That was again at Jones and Gustafson. I was like, "Can guys bet on themselves?" This is 2013. He's like, "Yeah, I'm okay with guys betting on themselves to win." But that was 10 years ago, and then like you said, 2 years ago after the James Krause betting scandal, which was in 2022, I believe. they changed their stance on it. They sent out this memo saying you can't bet on yourself or against. I mean, obviously you can't bet against yourself, but you can't bet on yourself either. And you can't have people that know you betting on yourself. Like you can't have your wife or your manager betting on you, your teammates, coaches. Now, I'm sure people still get around this because, like you said, they keep mentioning at the press conferences, like, "Oh yeah, we made better" or whatever. But I think if you don't make it like super obvious, then that's the way to go. But they're not supposed to. But I'm sure it still happens. Basically, like is my answer to that. So they're not supposed to, but I think it does still happen. And for me, like, because these guys don't even get paid that much money anyways, like for the most part. I mean, some of the superstars do, obviously, but a lot of these guys don't make that much money. So if they want to like risk their paycheck, they're confident in themselves, or they want to risk part of it, their purse or whatever, to bet on themselves, like I wouldn't have a problem with it. Now, when you're betting against yourself, that's an issue, right? And I think that with the Crows thing, with the Derek Minner thing, the thing was he was hiding an injury. There was all this money that came in on Minner. Kraus was telling people in his Discord. I don't even know if it's true or not. Like that was the allegations. And I'm not even sure what happened to Kraus now. Like I think he's still like around. I think he's doing real estate now or something, but it's just that really changed like the course of like what they thought with the gambling thing. And like even in Ontario, they stopped letting you bet on UFC for like 3 or 4 months. Like they're like, we're not allowing UFC bets anymore. Like they didn't allow it at all, which sucked, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that they're not supposed to do it, but I think guys probably still get around it. And again, like, what is it that hard to be like, and if you'd be stupid to like leave it in like, the form of a text message or something. But like, if you're hanging out with someone, you can just tell them, hey, take this money and go bet on me. And like, they wouldn't even know, right? Like, I could give you guys something right now and you go to the casino and make a bet. And then when next time I see you, give me the money, right? No one would really know. So I think that's kind of the way around it. But as long as you're not like super bait and obvious, probably like that's probably the way to do it.
Aren't the UFC's in your neck of the woods, or at least in Canada this weekend, right?
That's funny you said that. So like I was doing a podcast the other day and some guys were like, "Hey, are you going to drive there?" And I'm like, "Okay, let me check how long it is to drive there. 34 hours to drive to Edmonton from Toronto." So yeah, like it's
sorry, I didn't look at a map.
No, you're good. You're good. I actually checked this the other day. And that's even cutting through the states. That's like going underneath the Great Lakes instead of around them, because Canada is a pretty big country, guys, as you know. So I'm not going, but I'll be watching it. But yeah, it is in Canada. It's just that the country's so big. But yeah, I went to the one in Toronto earlier this year, which was 297 Strickland Duplessis. That was pretty good. I mean, we had a bad night for the Canadians. I think they went like 0-10 or something. It was horrible.
Yeah,
like,
I remember.
Yeah, I think the two girls won, Robertson and Jazz Davicius, but all the guys lost. It was crazy. And then this weekend, you have like a bunch of Canadians on too.
Yeah, no. So I was gonna ask you. I mean, I know Matt's got a question for you but this just jumped in my head because it hit me. I mean, we didn't even plan, having a Canadian on the same week that the UFC's in Canada. I was like, oh, this kind of works out. So like just off the top of your head, without this card, look at what fights jump out at you as far as like entertaining for the better.
I mean, I think the card's good. Like I know some people have kind of like said it's not a great card, but I think it's pretty good.
I think it's fantastic.
So do I. I think maybe some of the bouts are out of order. Like I don't think this Kyle Machado Brenton Ribeiro fight should be like fourth from the top. That should be like buried in the prelims. But like I think it's a good card. Just starting with the main event, like man, I'm gonna take a shot on Amir Albazi as an underdog here. Now, like obviously Moreno's a former champion. He's a really good fighter. Don't get me wrong. It's just I've been high on Albazi for a while, and I'm surprised he's like underdog odds right now. He's 5-0 in the UFC. He's never lost. He's been off for a year and a half though, so like that's a problem. That's a layoff is always something to consider, but like that immediately that one comes to mind. And then I mean there's a bunch of good fights, but like just from entertainment value, like how could you go wrong with Derek Lewis, right? And Jonata Denise. You'd imagine someone gets brutally knocked out in that fight. And there's some other good fighters like Mike Malott. He had a huge upset loss to Neil Magny in Toronto, dominating the fight for 4 minutes and 30 seconds and then completely gassed out and got finished with like 15 seconds left. He's fighting Trevin Giles. These guys never go the distance, so that fight should be fun. And then there's some good prelims too, actually. So I think overall it's a strong card.
I think it's a good
entertainment point of view. Yeah, I think so too.
You mentioned not being able to make this one. I'm just going to ask a question because I'm old school. So my introduction primarily to Canadian MMA. There was TKO and stuff, but I didn't get to see that too often. I think I have some DVDs and stuff from trades, but
me too.
MFC. HD Net Fights.
Maximum Fighting Championship. I think.
Yeah, Sam Alvey, Ryan Ford.
Yep.
Do you ever get out to any of those shows?
They don't have a promotion anymore. I don't believe. I think they ended like maybe over 10 years ago.
But did you ever get out to any of the? Did you back in the day? Did you ever make it to any?
No, I don't. I don't think they came to Ontario. I can double check that. Let me double check that. I want to make sure. They usually did their event in Alberta. I'd watch them though on HDTV. I think that's where I used to watch the fights. I'm sure you used to watch HDTV too. It was great for fights. I'm gonna check right now.
Yeah.
They did all their events in Edmonton, so yeah, I don't think I would be able to go. But I did go to. And actually, they had one in Windsor, Ontario too, but I wasn't able to make that.
I just remember Militech in like these blizzards and stuff, and they're they're at like some random casino.
But you know what though? I think you brought up another good point. Like that job I used to work at with Aaron, we had at the Score, we had our own fight promotion called the Score Fighting Series. So it just so happened that I was working for this TV station that also had the Score Fighting Series, and they only did like I want to say like 6 or 8 events or something. I'm gonna check right now. They did 7 events, but I did go to a bunch of these events at like pretty small places here in Ontario, and a lot of fighters actually ended up going to the UFC from those cards. Like Jordan Meehan, for instance, headlined 2 of their events, and he fought in the UFC for a while. But there was also some other smaller events that I went to in Ontario. They just don't really do them that often anymore. But there was one I went to, and I was telling this to someone the other day about this because they were telling me they worked as a cameraman at this event, which was crazy. Mike Malott was on this card. It's called Substance Cage Combat, 2014, I want to say. And we got there as media, and this is about as Canadian as it gets, guys. It was at a hockey arena, and the media section was in the penalty box. So they sat us on the penalty box. I'm not even joking. It was crazy. We're all sitting there watching the cage from the penalty box. It was actually pretty cool, but as Canadian as it gets. But yeah, I mean, like, I think that's one of the things, like, I would say, not that anyone's asking for my advice, but I would say, like, covering those smaller shows is never a bad idea, especially if you're starting out, because it's like, I almost look at like being a writer in the space as like being a fighter in some ways. Like you don't just jump into the UFC unless you like CM Punk, you got privilege, right? You have to work your way up. So I started going to these small events. Like I was going to these, shows with 1,000 people or whatever, like, or even less sometimes, and watching them and covering them. And then you slowly work your way up to the UFC in some ways. So I think that's something I would say too. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely been to my fair share of the regional shows. And I love them, but it's just at this point in my life, it's a little different than being a young 20-year-old guy. I'm a lot older now, and I have other things I have going on in my life, so it's not as easy.
The crowds are a little different now too. When you go to a local thing, like they're not what they were. I want to say not even 5 years ago. Like the crowds are a little different now. There's more folks that are a little.
I mean, you would know that you guys have tons of events out there where you are in Jersey.
Yeah.
Like you have. CFFC, you have Ring of Combat, you have Maverick, you have these other promotions, right? So and even you in California, right? You have.
I could go to one every weekend.
Yeah, like I think is Gladiator Challenge, is that near you too, or is that?
Yeah, it's in California. That one you don't have to look for. There's fights on the reservations out here. There's amateur MMA left and right.
Uriah Faber's promotion, I know he's doing.
Yeah,
right?
I mean that's
northern, right?
Northern, but again, if I wanted to drive 7 hours, I could go,
Yeah,
so
we just don't have that as much here in Ontario. Like I think again when it got legalized in 2011 or whatever it was, like we were having shows, these like regional shows every few months. Now it's like it's pretty rare. Like they don't happen that often. I would go to more of them too, but it's not available. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean I think that I still have 1 million and I don't go to what I used to. I mean I've been to probably 50 King of the Cages and 49 of them were prior to 2006. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like it was one of those things where, but I feel like once the UFC got huge, and the rosters, it took away from all those shows. Like, I mean, I saw Rampage Jackson fighting King of the Cage. I saw Uriah Faber. I saw Marvin Eastman and Rico Rodriguez and Guy Metzger and Akira Shoji from Pride. Like I watched so that was what you could always have a headliner where it was like, okay, we know that guy.
Yeah,
we know that guy. He's a big name. He fought in Pride or he fought in UFC. Or, and now it's harder. Now you really have to do your like you said, you have to really be deep, like to know the guys or be a friend of somebody fighting. Because it's not like it used to be. Just it was so easy to find a fight. I'd have fight. It would be Mark Kerr versus Babalu on a random Saturday. And you'd be like, well, okay, what event is this? Or, Boyne and Tello versus Tim Sylvia.
Yeah.
And you just,
he's a ref now.
Yeah.
Is he really a headhunter?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he just refed something. I forget what it was.
I mean, I don't mind. I think it's a good thing that the former fighters are reffing. Like you just had Shaylin Ribeiro. He was reffing the last card. He fought in Strikeforce. I think maybe he fought in those California shows. I'm not sure. Obviously, Chris Lieben. I mean, that would be the big guy out there, right? Too. I don't know about them judging fights. To be honest with you, I feel like there's still like some biases there, but I think for the reffing, especially, like
the reffing, yeah, for sure, I agree.
Yeah, and they need good refs. MMA reffing is like I think it's such a hard job, and I think it's just completely thankless. MMA reffing, like the second you stop a fight too soon or late, people are shitting on you over the internet, right? So it's just hard. And then with the judging thing, I don't find that is hard to do. And also, like I feel like judges have like such a good job, really. I mean, these guys fly around the world. They sit front row. They have cage side seat, and they're still screwing up.
You should listen to. We had
Sean Wheelock.
John Wheelock.
Oh, did you?
We had Sean Wheelock. Yeah, we had him on. We've had him on a few times, and we talked to him about judging, and he kind of opened my eyes up to. I don't know if judging is as good or easy as it seems from our perspective, because the stuff he told us, he talked about how they watch fights and how they don't really have the same vantage point. I mean, we kind of have a better one at home.
And you can see them on TV, like they're moving around the cage like this and stuff. I get that, but again, I still think it's easier than roughing, and that's kind of what I was making the comparison to. Like, I think the roughing is the hardest thing. Not that you guys were even asking me, but you did mention Buentello was roughing fights, which is cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome. Good for him.
Yeah, I can't remember the event, but it was not that long ago that I saw. And I remember I texted my buddy. I was like, because I remember watching him fight way back when, and to see all these guys reffing and do stuff. I mean. People, I forget if somebody was talking about Shaolin. Shaolin's been reffing out here for a while.
Yeah.
Because he's got a gym out in North Jersey by where I used to live in Westfield. I forget the name of the town, but
he's been a ref for about 10 years. California's brought, California's being cool because they're bringing in, got Chris Lieben, Frank Trigg, now Boyne and Tello.
Frank Trigg too. Yeah.
Starting to bring some of the former fighters, to giving them the opportunities. And I don't know. We'll see how that turns out. I mean, Shaolin was got a little criticism perhaps for letting that fight go, but turned out to be, in my opinion, the right decision. And I think Caposa Online kind of said it best. Like, if you're going to let fighters now become referees, be prepared to let these guys they know the limitations of these guys. So you might see some fights that look a little bit more grimy and that are allowed to continue because they get a better read. They have a better read. There you go. Just like gambling, they have a read on their fighters, and they've been in that situation, so they understand what's superficial and what's concussive and all that other stuff. So, kind of wrapping up here. I don't necessarily need you to give your pick on Stipe Jones. I imagine you'll want to do that on your own show. But what are the odds on that right now? And like, if I was a random dude throwing down some money, where do you see the smart money on that fight?
Yeah, so I was actually looking at this the other day. Let me pull it up. I want to be accurate with this. Jones is the favorite, obviously, but it's like the number is really swelled. Okay, so he's a minus 700 favorite now. I think he opened at minus 300, so he's minus 700. And again, Stipe is plus 500 underdog. I mean, it seems a little steep. It seems a little steep.
That's
it really does, though. I mean, like, I think people are completely writing him off, and I get it. I think he's 42. He hasn't fought 3.5 years. He was really knocked out by Francis his last fight, but like, I mean, for my money, he probably is the best, most accomplished heavyweight in UFC history, right? So it's kind of crazy seeing him this, but at the same time, like, how do you pick against John Jones? Like, how do you do it, right? Jones is still the GOAT. I mean, I think we'd all agree he's the best fighter probably of all time, or one of them. And yeah, I just think the odds are a little heavy, guys. Like, I don't know. Like, if you're making a straight bet, which I just talked about, like, you'd have to lay 700 to win 100. Like, I don't. Doesn't
sound like there's no reason to put money on Jones. If you want to make some money, it would be Stipe. But it also sounds like the odds people are telling you that this fight's kind of decided.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think a few years ago, though, this line would have been a lot tighter. Like, I don't think it would have been as crazy as this, but I think the odds makers kind of know he's going to win. And also, again, I think most people will probably be putting their money on Jones, probably in parlays. That's probably what people are going to do. You know what they're going to do, guys? I know what they're going to do. This is what they're going to do. This is UFC 309, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah. So they're going to do a parlay, and they're going to put John Jones, and they're going to put Bo Nickel in the parlay. He's like minus 1,000. They're going to put those two guys. and then they're going to find some other fight to like bring the juice down or whatever. So that's what people are going to do. Or they might just parlay Jones and Nickel. They could do that. Let me check what the odds are on that. I want to see what
that's going to be. What base up bet 100 to win $12.
So if it cuts it in half if you put Bo Nickel and Jones. Like it actually cuts it in half. So instead of laying 7, you're laying 3.5. But again, it comes back to the whole. Well, if you weren't going to lay 7-1 on this guy, if you're parlaying, it's just rolling it over to the next fight. But again, I think people will do that. That's my guess. So again, Bo Nickel, I think you'll see his line go to like minus 1,500, minus 2,000 soon. He's always a huge favorite. And right now, like there's 3 fights that have odds right now from what I'm seeing. The other fight would be the Charles Oliveira Chandler fight. That fight could be competitive, but they have fought before, and Charles won by stoppage. So if you parlayed him, Jones, and Nickel, you're getting like almost even money, right? And I think people will like make bets like that to like bring the juice down, and you'll see that Jones line keep climbing because everyone has it in a parlay.
Because like Chandler's favored, right? Chandler's favored.
Oliveira's favored. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did that shift or did it open?
No, he's been the favorite the whole time. They fought in 2000 and
Chandler has never won in the Garden.
Yeah, they fought in 2021 and Chandler got knocked out in the second round. Yeah. Chandler's also coming off 2 straight losses at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
And Gates. Yeah, but I mean, look who he fought. Are you going to that card, Ed? Are you going to go to it?
No, it's
the ticket prices are crazy, right?
Yeah, they do. I haven't.
That's the other thing too. Like the prices are really, really crazy these days. Yeah. Like I'm sure when you used to go to King of the Cage, you're probably paying $10 and get, you're getting
no. MMA has never been that cheap. But you talk about you and your odds. Like I'm the ticket guy. So like I'm going to my 64th UFC event in December.
That's amazing. Really,
I've probably been to about 300 MMA events in my life.
Holy shit.
And so yeah, I mean, I have a long history. We can talk off about maybe some of the stuff that I've seen done and been around. But
incredible.
But yeah, the prices are insane. Actually, 310 is the first like reasonably priced card in years. You can get into that event for about $100 right now.
Oh really?
Or when it there was a $125 option. Even now, I think you can get in for $125. So it's really reasonable for that one. But yeah, the New York cards have, and I went to the 205. The McGregor fight, that was the first time I was like exposed to like, okay, this is lunacy. How we're going to start spending money, and now that's like the regular price, which is
for sure. No, I was just exaggerating because I remember even when I went to 129, I think I was a broke college student. I paid maybe like $500 for my tickets for that. That was the
I paid $60 to sit row 5 for Liddell versus Belfort at UFC 37.5.
That was your first one.
No, my first one was UFC 33.
33.
And I got called up on stage. I won a drawing. I got pictures with Carmen Electra. I got yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. Actually, I got a story like that too. So I went to Bellator card. Jeez, I can't remember who was on it, but it was one of these casinos here in Ontario, which they don't really do them anymore. But they did. They had a punching machine in the back, like that one that the Pereira punch. So you could just punch it, and it's just like punch it and win a prize. So all of a sudden they called. They're like Adam Martin has the biggest punch, and this is what I was training Muay Thai. Like, so I had a pretty good punch. I'm a big guy too, so I'm like, holy shit! So I went up there and I met all those ring card girls. I got a picture with what's her name, Jade, and Bryce, Mercedes,
Jade Bryce,
Jade Bryce, yeah.
Oh, they were great. That was awesome. Yeah, I got to bring all my boys with me up there too. So
well, I gotta win because unless you can beat Jimmy Smith coming into the crowd to grab you and bring you down cage side to meet Fedor Emelianenko, I'm not real sure.
That's
I've had some epic moments.
What was the first event you went to? The first MMA event?
The first MMA event I went to was the Cobra Challenge. Mark Hall, the Cobra who fought in the early UFCs. Yeah. I got beat up in high school, saw that he fought about 40 miles north of me, drove up there, found a phone book. This is before cell phones, pulled his address out of a phone book at a gas station, knocked on his door and told him I wanted to learn how to fight, and trained with him. And then he started promoting bare knuckle, no holds barred fights. And I was late at high school and right out of high school, and I helped him promote fights. And so the first one was the Cobra Challenge. The very first fight I ever saw, a guy knocked a guy out with a 12-6 elbow, ran to the corner and gave me a high five in the crowd. I actually have the VHS tape of the event. So
that's incredible, man.
Yeah, I mean, and from that point on, the first fight I ever went to was Shane Mosley versus Wilfredo Rivera, a boxing match. And that's actually when I ran into Mark Hall, and he was handing out flyers for his event, and the story was from that point on. I mean,
you're
been hundreds of shows.
You're a true veteran, my friend. That's for sure. Like, I mean, again, like because we didn't have it legalized, it was harder to go to the events. But the first one I went to, we drove across the border and we saw BJ Penn and Matt Hughes 3, where he got knocked out in about 21 seconds. That was UFC 123. And then it was Machida and Rampage. But again, this is a little farther in time.
Was that Detroit?
That was in Detroit, yeah. So that's like a 4-hour drive. I drove down with two of my friends. We saw the fight, drove back. I went to work the next day because I was still a student and I had to work this shitty retail job. And I remember telling the guy I worked with, because me and this guy used to talk about fights all the time. We'd sit there and we'd watch like fights like during our shifts. And I was like, I just got back from Detroit. He's like, no, you didn't. I'm like, yes, I did. I went to the fight and came back home and worked. But I mean, you've been doing it for way longer, man. That's crazy.
Just a lot of I've got a bunch of cool stories.
No, I love that. Yeah. I love the stories, dude. Like that's what I love. Like I remember that I met John Morgan once, one of the bigger MMA journalists. I'm sure you know him. And I remember we were talking, and I just asked him like, what was the first event you went to? And he said, I went to this event with like Yves Edwards, knocked some guy out, and this is like 1996 or something. Like so, like that's about probably when you were getting into like 90s, like 2000s. Mm-hmm. I respect the shit out of you guys that have been watching it and doing it for so long, because I was just a kid at that point, right? And it's like crazy now. I'm in like my mid-late 30s, and there's all these younger people coming up, and they're just getting into it, or they just got into it a few years ago.
I know they're like McGregor Mendez was my first one.
I know, crazy, right? I'm like, damn, like I was like in like the middle of like my career at that point, Yeah. So it's wild, man. But again, even me, like I'm like, oh, but I saw these fights. And it's like this guy's like, well, I saw like Cobra Challenge and Mark.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I Chuck Liddell borrowed my watch to keep time for his fighter. Before right after he felt like Jeff Monson in UFC, Tito Ortiz. I mean, I grew up in the hotbed, so I was just. Yeah. What
do you think Don Davis's first?
Yeah. Mike Tyson versus somebody probably.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like for me, like even when like after I got into it though, like I'm right in front of my collection right now. Like I bought all the DVDs and I watched all the fights. Like I've seen all the you've obviously seen them too. I watched all the UFCs from the beginning to end, right? So, and then all the other posts. I'm looking at my thing right now. Like I got all these. Actually, I got a like right under my feet. I have 2 rows of UFC, and then I have a row of Pride, and then I have a row of like I have King of the Cage right here. I don't know if you probably know these events. Let me pull them up here. Let's see.
Wet and Wild.
I got one.
Here, that was when it was raining.
I'm not sure. Like I don't.
I probably if they're
this one. This
one? Yeah. That's a Pele on the cover there. Sin City. That was in Vegas. I think that had Dean Lister on the card. Unfinished Business. That was Diego Sanchez and Santiago.
Yeah, and then this is a good one. Joe Daddy. Oh.
Yeah, I think that's those are a couple of those are like the teens that's getting up there. I went to King of the Cage 3 was the first one I went to. And that was Dwayne Ludwig when he did the crane kick to Shad Smith.
Got this one too. Actually there was this guy on Twitter. I think he's on Twitter again. This guy named Bloodstain Lane. You guys probably know who he is.
I know the name. Yeah.
So I never really knew him too well, but I remember like at one point he sold his collection. I bought it from him. I think I paid $200 and I got like all of his old DVDs. It was definitely worth it. I wouldn't have sold it. I mean,
dude, to
be honest, I don't know how much the stuff's even worth, but I'm glad I got it.
That's why I keep looking over here, because I have I never unpacked the box, but it's literally right there in the closet. And I always Matt knows what I'm going to say, because I always say it's all the Pride events I have in one box.
Yeah. I have all the. Like I used to watch them all the time. Like I watched all these fights. Like I'd be watching, all the Takanori Gomi fights. I love Charles Crazy Horse Bennett, man. I loved watching his fights back in the day. All the favorite fights, all those fights. But like, even like I'm looking, like once in a while, I'll go to the dollar store and just look around what they have. I remember I picked up this one a few months ago.
IFL, there you go.
Like $3. Wow. You know what I mean? I haven't opened it yet, but to be honest, I probably won't watch it, but just to have. And
it's good to have that physical media, because then if you check, some of them are worth like crazy money. Like I found out like I have my copy of Choke over here in my little DVD rack of the Hicks and Gracie documentary. Yeah, and then I looked it up, and I'm like, there's people paying like $200, $500 for that.
Yeah, I haven't looked, but I mean, for me, it's like I don't think I'd ever sell it, but
no, yeah, same here.
One day my daughter might or something, or maybe she'd watch it. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know how much she'll be into it, but
I have a bunch of the original. I have UFC 1 through 200. I have all the original pay-per-view. I didn't. Now we're not telling anybody because Dana White, because it's illegal. But I have all the original copies. So like I have UFC 1's original broadcast, and
I used to have like a way to, I can't remember what it's called, but I used to have like a hard drive, I guess, and I would tape all the pay-per-views too. But with the new TV I have, like, I can't access it anymore, but I do have these on hard drive, and I would I'd tape all the pay-per-views. So I have the same as you, the original broadcast, which is pretty fucking cool.
But, one more quick story since you managed Gladiator Challenge. Last Gladiator Challenge I went to was Dan Severn versus Cal Worsham, who were two of the old school.
Oh, wow.
Cal Worsham since passed away, unfortunately. But Severn was my guy. Severn was my dad's favorite fighter before my dad passed. It was just he was my guy. I got in. I mean, I loved Hoist and but Severn was kind of like that all-American, just looks like everybody's dad, and he's kicking ass. I hadn't met him yet, and I had met almost everybody. Well, I'm standing on the line when he walks out of the ring. He beats Cal Worsham, and I jumped into his entourage, and I just walked with him out of the cage into the locker room. He thought I was a guest of the casino. The casino thought I was part of his team. The next thing I know, I'm in the locker room with Dan Severn, getting photos. He thinks I'm like
sick.
Dude, it was the most incredible thing.
That's a great story, man. You had this guy has some pretty fucking good stories.
I have a lot.
I mean, I don't think you could even do that anymore, probably, right? Like at this point.
At these events, you probably could. You just got to have guts. I've always learned from day one, act like you know where you're going, and you can get a lot of way at MMA events. From getting better seats to just act like you know where you're going, and always have a beer in your hand so the ticket person, the ticket attendant can't ask for your ticket if you got beer and nachos in your hand.
I love it. You know what's crazy? There's so many people that watch the sport that haven't been to an event before, which I find crazy. But with the prices, like I kind of get it, but at the same time, like you got to find your way to a live
Everybody
event.
should go at least once. Mm-hmm. I've been to 1 million. I'm not saying do that because it's crazy. And it's taken up a huge part of my life. But everybody should go at least once.
What's your next event?
I'm going to 310 in Vegas. And I got my last one I went to was. Oh shoot! Was it BKFC or was it? No, it was the one in Colorado. I was just out there for that.
Nice
for Super Lek Haggerty.
Yeah, that was supposed to be my next event. The one event,
but yeah, I'm kind of BKFC now. I'm more limited. Oh, yeah? Like I kind of keep it in my area. They're in California now. I go to Vegas. I mean, I've flown out to New York. I've flown out all around, but I kind of just there's enough right now to keep me entertained. I just like having something on my schedule. It's always nice to go, hey, I'm going to a fight in a couple months or next month, and that's my that's what keeps me going. That's what keeps me interested in the sport. Is just I love the live experience. It's not for everybody. It's not as good as watching on television, but the experience of sitting there at a big fight. I sit up top most of the time. I'm not a high roller. I get into the events and I watch what I can, and if I can sneak up and get better seats, or I use some of my tricks of the trade through Ticketmaster to figure out where I want to go. But yeah, I mean, I think it's every fight fan should try to do a UFC pay-per-view at least once in their life for a fight. And if it's a fighter that you love and you want to go see them, because you don't know how long they're going to be here. And if they're at the top of their game, that's the time, because you will never forget that moment. Getting a chance to see Fedor Emelianenko in person, cage side, was in the early days when he was undefeated, was still one of the most amazing things. So whether it's, Topuria or Nurmagomedov or any of these guys now, if you're a fan of them and you get a chance to go see them, I highly recommend you set money aside and do it at least once in your life, because it will change the way you see the sport and how you appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, before Matt takes us out, Adam, why don't you let folks know where to follow you and see your work online?
Yeah, you got my Twitter handle right there, guys, at MMAdamMartin. So follow me there. Bookies.com. That's my main home these days. I just did I posted my predictions article for UFC Edmonton. And then MMAOddsbreaker.com. Got my podcast with Big Marcel, MMA OB Daily Podcast. We do it every week. So it's awesome. And then Spectation Sports. Can't forget about them, Ed. Got to give them a shout out too.
Yeah.
Regional MMA. I just wrote my preview for Mecca 23.
That had to be rough, right? With his last minute change.
Well, was supposed to fight in the main event, and he got, I don't know what happened. He got injured and pulled out or what happened.
Yeah.
But he's out of the fight. And all of a sudden they put in this new guy. So one of your guys, I think, right? Ring of Combat dude, if I'm not mistaken, or CFFC guy. I can't remember his name. Murrieta. Oh, he just fought at the right thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Moses Murrieta. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. So anyways, check it out. I appreciate you guys having me. It was fun, man. Good talk.
Awesome. Do you have at Adam Martin? Is that across the board?
Yeah, it's just Adam Martin. I really only have Twitter. I mean, I have Instagram, but it's literally just pictures of my kid and my dog. So it's not.
Okay.
I don't want people seeing this. I mean, not that I don't want to share it, but not with like randos. I got enough people on Twitter saying you suck, and no, I'm kidding. I don't get that much hate once in a while for a bad scorecard or something. I don't know. But,
cool.
I'm the territory, man. But yeah.
Fans can check out the show at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow me, Matthew Hawkins, at MMAHawk21 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter, Carbeerzol on Instagram, and Old Head Carb on Twitch. Appreciate the time, Adam. It was a pleasure meeting you. Anytime you got any questions or want to reach out, we're happy to help. And, just thank you for your time. It's awesome.
Yeah, no problem,
new people and good people in the business.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to be here. And it was a lot of fun, man. So take care, guys, and have a great week, and talk to you guys soon, okay?
Yeah.
Good night. Thanks for listening, everyone.